meet on Monday, June 2nd, 2025. It is 4:47 p.m. Before we go to the agenda, I just want to note that I need to step out at 5:30, so I'll be passing the gavel to our CAO to run the last little bit. Seconded by Council Carpenter. Motion made by Councilor Travers. Any discussion on the matter before we vote? See none. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is our public forum. It is the standard practice of Board of Finance to first go to members of the public in the room and then to go online. And if we have a number of folks, we'll use city council rules for about 2 minutes or so because we do have a tight agenda today. So first, is anyone in the room today that would like to speak to the Board of Finance? Yeah. Can you come on out, please, and introduce yourself? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Dietz. I'm the director at the Heineberg Community Senior Center in the New North End. And just wanted to return. I was here a couple of weeks ago and wanted to come back and say a couple of more things. I want to be clear that the needs of older adults in Burlington are many, and the Heineberg alone can't meet them. I think it's an important opportunity, I will say, to think about other partnerships, whether it be library programming, whether it be city arts or Age Well or the Y, and really thinking about how can we create a coordinated offering of services and programming so that older adults can be healthy and active in the community. I think that I visited CORE on Friday, and what I heard from folks there was that the central challenge for them is going to be transportation and thinking about how to get people from their homes to either the Heineberg or other locations around the city. Some of them may be able to use public transportation and others would need door-to-door SSTA service. And I think food access is also an issue in terms of people being able to get nutritious meals, particularly in the middle of the day if they're out and about in town. And the Heineberg currently, with the help of the city 2 years ago, launched an in-house meals program. So we serve a homemade lunch twice a week. We have 30 seats at that meal and they are all full pretty much all the time. So we've been able to move from ARPA funding to funding from local businesses and donors, which is great. And I think that if there are more people who want, more older adults who want meals, that's going to be something that will need to be addressed because we just don't have the funding to do that. And I think that's all I'd like to say at this point. Thank you so much.
Anyone else here in the room who'd like to address the Board of Finance? Seeing none, I will go online, and we have former City Councilor Sharon Busher. Sharon, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. And it's not raining, so that's good. There's a lot of good things on this agenda, and in my opinion, and then there are a couple of troubling things. And I wanted to just speak to two things. One is, Mayor, your regional programs and the funding that you have proposed and those agencies that you're no longer funding for this fiscal year. And I just wanted to highlight two that draw my attention and concern. One is a small dollar amount. It's $2,500, the American Red Cross. And in my experience, the Red Cross, when there's a fire in Burlington and people are displaced, the Red Cross is that agency that comes to the need of the people, clothing, etc. They're there immediately. And so for me, the $2,500 is more than, I mean, what we pay what we give them, we get so much back for those individuals who need their services. So I am concerned about that. The second one is the VNA, the Visiting Nurse Association, and I don't know what their ask was, if there was an ask. I know that they get monies from other agencies, but I'm also well aware, because I worked in healthcare for 50 years, I'm well aware that the VNA goes to people's homes to draw their blood if they have transportation issues. They go and do wellness checks, check blood pressure. It's health, and I'm very concerned about the people that are either disabled or elderly and have no transportation and no way to get to a doctor's office. And so that funding is not small. That was in the past $121,000. But I am really concerned about the population that it served. And your communication, thank you for that, but it doesn't say it. And I don't, you don't have all the time in the world, but it doesn't say if there are other sources of funding so that the services that they provide will continue. I am really concerned about these two agencies, and have seen in my own eyes the benefit that Burlingtonians get from them. So I just wanted to highlight those two. And the other thing, and I'm not going to belabor it, but I am going to make my statement again. I continue, this is on your consent agenda. I continue to be concerned about impact fees. And my concern is, for the administration and for the city council, is that you have been very thorough in the rationale and the presentation. And I agree with funding water and wastewater. Yes, yes. Transportation, yes, but I know they have other funding sources also. And I guess what I haven't seen was the statement that if we only do those two, then we can free up capital monies for the other departments that we're not going to impose impact fees on development for. But I haven't seen that really be presented in a scenario. And so I really would have benefited from seeing that, to see that there were actual dollars. And maybe because I'm not on the council and I follow things, but I'm not perfect. I haven't seen like a 5-year capital plan where you see the needs of the city and you understand what the funding is. And so you'd understand what dollars were going to water and wastewater, if any, and to transportation, and how those dollars would no longer be in the capital funding, which I'm not sure I think will really happen. Then those dollars would go to the other, like fire or police or libraries or parks. So I'm sorry that took me longer to say, but that's my concern. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. Is anyone else online who would like to wish us a public forum, would like to address public forum for finance? Seeing none, I will close public forum and we'll move on to our next item, which is our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Arlo. Thank you. Any discussion on the consent agenda before we vote? Councilor Travers.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate some conversations that have taken place today with respect to the resolution on impact fees. I know the full council will be acting on the ordinance at its meeting, which I recognize is more time sensitive. There's also been questions around whether or not the administrative regulations connected with the impact fees on item 11 should potentially be postponed to give folks additional time on them. So I know that is now before the Board of Finance. I suppose I'm questioning whether or not if there's intention to postpone that item, whether or not it should be included as part of the consent agenda. not to complicate things, but it just, if that is what's going to happen later, I'm wondering if we should just deal with it as a Board of Finance as well, at a later meeting, with additional time on the item. Trying to walk the line of not debating it because it is on our consent agenda.
Right, I'm gonna look to our city attorney in terms of the process. My read of this is they are two different steps of the process, Board of Finance decision and then city council. So if the full council decides to make a different decision, that is for the council to decide upstairs, and this body can make a decision to advance it, and it can be voted to postpone upstairs. Date certain.
And is
That
the,
is your question, that is yours. Am I getting that?
Yes, well, I guess I'm posing, I know that we could pass it here and postpone it before council. I suppose my question to the administration is what, if there is going to be action before the council to postpone it there, would it make sense to also postpone it before the Board of Finance such that we could just have those two discussions on the same night at the same time?
Well, in general, I will say in general, because I don't want to debate this either, because it is on consent. The council has been given many presentations on this matter, so I think at this point it is at the step of a deliberative process. And so I would encourage us, and I think the motion be. Since it is on the consent and we didn't change the agenda earlier, I would say that this is the question in front of the Board of Finance is to act on this in terms of the consent agenda, and then further deliberations can take place upstairs. And I don't think it's only okay. And also for the action here, this is to just start the process for getting sponsorship of the actual resolution. Thank you for that kind of clarification. All the steps this is taken. I mean, impact fees have had a number of public presentations, just my earlier point. But for the action tonight, this is really, per the city attorney's office, a step to actually start the process with sponsorship by the Board of Finance to get this into the queue. So that is the action tonight that's being.
All right. I don't mean to overly complicate things, but I would like to move the impact fees resolution off the consent agenda and place it on the deliberative and have a potential amendment to propose at that point in time.
Because she just marked my white coat. Over here, and that is a crisis. All right, crisis for another day. And I have to confess, I'm just gonna make sure we're doing this motion is in order, since we did already approve our agenda to move something off consent
I wasn't,
when we already approved the agenda.
so when you asked procedurally before, I was like, I didn't hear a motion to amend. So is that the motion that's on the table now? To amend the agenda and move an item from consent to deliberative?
I would like to move the impact fees resolution from the consent agenda to deliberative. Yes, and that is a motion, and if that requires a suspension of our rules, then I suppose that is what I would be voting.
So that is just my question to double check with you, city attorney. This requires the suspension of our rules because we have already approved the agenda for this meeting.
I mean, yes, I'm gonna say if the agenda's been approved and now we want to change it, did we approve it? That's.
We have approved the agenda, and we have a first and a second on considering the consent agenda now as our third item. And now in order, my interpretation is if we are to amend the consent agenda, that was the first step to do that would have been during the actual adoption of the agenda. But now if we want to do that, that would require.
Okay. I don't want to overly complicate things. I will withdraw my motion, but will note that I've shared a proposed amendment with folks on the administrative regulations, and beyond that, I think that there may be interest in postponing the administrative regulations resolution to another council meeting. But I'll withdraw my motion here and prepare it for a vote on the consent agenda, but do just want to flag that maybe some additional movement on it, notwithstanding a vote in favor of this resolution before the Board of Finance.
I appreciate that, and especially if an amendment is coming, I think it's just better to have this formed as a deliberative item rather than doing it in the middle of the Board of Finance meeting. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Okay, so back to our motion on the floor, which is the consent agenda. first and a second. Is there any further discussion on the consent agenda? Councilor Carpenter.
Well, that's what was confusing to me. Because I hadn't thought we approved our consent agenda. So, and then this is more of a process than this in particular.
I will say, I also didn't realize that we were still in the middle of voting on whether to adopt the consent agenda specifically.
Oh, we did not approve it, the consent agenda. Then what happens?
If we did not approve the consent agenda, then all of the matters, all 11 items, would either another motion could be taken to table it or not. My point is, if we were to move something off the consent agenda process-wise, whatever the item, to deliberative, that would be a proper motion of the adoption of the agenda at the top of the meeting, which we did not do. We could still amend this, but it would take a rule suspension. Councilor Travers withdrew that motion. So at this point, we're back to the original motion, which is, do we adopt the consent agenda or not? As posted.
I'm fine, I just, it's more of a picture, like, if I didn't want to adopt a consent agenda, I just want to understand.
So on the first item of the agenda, that would be a great time to move something off to the deliberative agenda or otherwise another action on that first item we take up. Okay, understood? All right, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Newbeezer, I'm sorry. I just saw your hand before we officially end that vote. In case I missed you during the calling the question.
No, sorry, I just wanted to clarify the thing we were voting on because I lost connection there for a second on the Zoom.
So I called the question on voting on the consent agenda. So yes, would affirm passing the consent agenda. Voting in the negative would oppose that.
I'll vote for it.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben.
For a nice clean vote, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to our first deliberative agenda item 4.1, which is an accepting a grant from the Friends of the Fletcher Free Library to the Fletcher Free Library Preservation Project for the 1904 building, Harbor Preservation Project. Mary Binko with us. Jonathan, thank you from the Friends. And I asked for this to be on the deliberative just briefly to help give a little bit more attention to this item, but also I hope that Director Danko will just sort of a little context about why we came to this place given federal changes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I've been in front of you all probably 8 times on this project because there's 3 different funding sources. There was the city match. We really thought we had it. To go back, one of the funding sources was NEH. And we actually had to come before this body even before we applied for the grant because it was a 3-to-1 match. And the city was putting something $730,000 to the NEH $200,000. And it was, I will say, it was a lot of work and took a lot of energy, and you all were all a part of that. And it was 2 Fridays ago we were made aware that the was withdrawn. It was rescinded. And that really put us in a tight spot because this whole project was built around expecting all those funding sources. So thanks to the Friends of the Fletcher Free Library, our 501c3 nonprofit that supports us in so many ways and who's been supporting us as we move forward on our larger capital campaign project, has offered to step in and fill that funding gap so we can continue with the project. Doesn't mean that we're not working with the attorney's office to see what recourse we might have against the federal government. We do think this was a wrongful action on their part, and those conversations are still happening, but we really needed this money to keep this project going. So very, very grateful to the Friends once again. That's that.
Jonathan, you want to add anything?
We love the city of Burlington. We love the Fletcher Free Library. Everything in our power to move this project forward to make sure that everything that happens is to the benefit of this piece of it, which I'm calling phase 0, but to the whole project.
Are there any questions or comments from councilors? Councilors,
Can you remind me where the other money, I know it's pieces, but you said the city had committed 700. Where did that come from? You know,
It was from capital. And then we also have the National Park Service grant,
okay,
which was 500 from the National Park
Okay.
Service. And then the city had that was a 1-to-1 match. There was 500,000. So the total of the project to get all this preservation work done and the windows refurbished, which will give us some energy efficiency, is about $2.6 million.
thanks.
Council Carpenter, any other questions or comments? Is there a motion? Oh. Either or, Council.
I'll make the motion. I just, thank you for coming back and presenting us again. Thanks to you for stepping. We'll all be supporting this motion, but it's worth specifically noting that as well. And I would be happy to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the acceptance of a grant in an amount not to exceed $845,000 grant of the Fletcher Free Library in support of the FFL Preservation Project 235 College Street. Further authorize the CAO to execute a grant agreement between the city and the Friends of the Fletcher Free in furtherance of such acceptance, subject to final review by the city attorney's office. And I'll do a two-part motion if that's in order. And also to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the CAO to take all such further actions, including by taking any necessary steps to ensure the creation of the project budget reflecting the acceptance of the grant award, to execute such further instruments approved as to form by the city attorney as may be necessary or convenient to effectuate the transactions contemplated hereby.
That language, thank you, Councilor Travers. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion that carries unanimously. Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you. All right, moving right along. Item 4.2, which is the delivery of the mayor's fiscal year 26 budget, which the CIO and myself will sort of tag team in a presentation.
We are short on time, so we will do this briefly. Also, we have been talking about the budget for as long as it feels like it's been raining outside. Forever. All right, the big headline and just
Oh, great, yeah.
the big headline here is affordability. This is something that we have been hearing from residents rather consistently, and as we'll show you through this presentation, we do know that taxes and fees have been rising steadily in the past few years. And we know that federal funding sources that we have relied on over the past 5 years have been drying up. And so we face an annual budget challenge. We pay fair wages and provide good health insurance, but the cost of providing those benefits is going up tremendously. And the administration is committed to affordability and to keep municipal tax increases as low as possible. And that's what this budget reflects. You can see here in a visual format at the bottom in blue is the total municipal tax rate. And at the top in green is the education rate, take them together. And that is the property tax rate. This graph shows the total tax cost in 2025 dollars, but over the past 20 years. And so you can see the, frankly, the burden of the property taxes on our residents in this slide. For a big picture view, you can see here over the past 5 years, the growth of the general fund budget and how that has been growing until this current year when we are proposing a slight reduction to help bend the curve. And how have we done that? As I mentioned, we are really trying to balance our obligation to be good stewards of city resources and especially taxpayer dollars with our obligation to our city employees. And as we've spoken about, we analyzed all of our programs and services through the service inventory so that we could focus on what are the core services that the city should provide. And that led in part to the difficult decision to eliminate 25 city positions. Also through the service inventory and through the ModGov efficiencies, you can see here the reductions in city services and programs that we've discussed, as well as some of the right sizing and consolidation throughout middle management and finance and grants administration, as well as IT. In bold at the bottom is an important point. Without these staff and program reductions, the city budget would have needed almost $4 million in additional revenues. And that would mean a municipal tax increase of 6.5 cents, which on a $500,000 home, which is what we use as an example, that would be a $325 annual increase. And you'll see later in the slides, that's on top of increases of several $100s over the past several years. This is, however, not an austerity budget. It is one that prioritizes investing in the areas that the mayor has laid out. And you can see that here, really focusing on community health and safety and a robust housing strategy. And that is reflected in money for public health work, the community safety system strategy, more staff on housing, and then increased investment with the Howard Center Street Outreach Team and increased investment with the BPD. We don't want to forget about the ratepayer affordability programs at both BED and water as well. Property taxes, you might recall my Lego example. 2/3 of our property taxes go straight to the state for education funding. The other 1/3 is for the city. And those city taxes have increased substantially over the past 3 years. So you can see it here, 6%, 6%, and 11% last year.
And Catherine, on that point, so when I think it's so important for context, when we said that the $4 million was back a couple slides ago, around if we were without those staff and program reductions, we would need to come up with another $4 million, and it'd be about $325 a year more. This is on top of 3 straight years of a significant tax increase. And one of the things that I have heard loud and clear in this community is deep concern around affordability. And it is time that we start thinking about more strategic budgeting. And that is the budget for which we are presenting to council, one that really truly identifies affordability and sustainability. And I do appreciate your comment about not austerity, because this does include strategic investments and things that are really critical for Burlington today.
So I just skipped ahead a couple of slides because it seems like it makes more sense here, and to really illustrate your point, Mayor, that if we were to have the $325 increase this year, you could really see that's on top of about a $200 increase in FY23 and 24, and then a $400 increase last year. So that's significant because obviously these build on each other, and as soon as a household absorbs one increase, there's another one waiting for them, which is very challenging. This budget, the increase is less than 1% compared to that 6% or 11%. We are still waiting for the state to make sure we know exactly what will happen on the education portion, but what we are proposing and what we see from the state, most taxpayers could see an overall tax reduction. And importantly, and echoing what the mayor said, this budget really does allow us to be on a more sustainable path for the next several years. It is sort of bending this very sharp curve we have with our expenses growing. And it makes it so that we are growing in a much more conservative way and more realistic compared to what we see growth in our grant list and some of our other revenue sources.
I just want to add on this last point, that this really puts us in a position to start putting in place multi-year budgeting. So in order to be able to make sure that we are closing this structural chronic budget gap that we've had within our municipal side of the budget from the general fund for several years now, this cues us up to a place where we have a much more workable gap that says here is realistic around real predictions of what our grant list will do, other revenue sources that we can realistically raise money from without pricing people out of Burlington. And this puts us on a much better trajectory around predictability, around when we do increase taxes. And so folks can plan and the city can plan accordingly. And I think it's really worth emphasizing those first two bullets, because this is very big news, that there is an increase of less than 1% that we're able to deliver in a balanced budget that includes investments in key critical areas. That was no small task. It came with a lot of really deep and difficult work by across departments, general fund departments in particular, with a real deep dive into what is a core city service. We've talked about the service inventory. We've talked about Modern Gov initiative. This is a lot of hard work that is often not done in the level of scrutiny that we ask leaders to do within the city. And I really appreciate their work. And combined with what's happening on the statewide level, this is overall a tax reduction. I want to make sure people read that, a tax reduction for most taxpayers in the city of Burlington. That's being in red, just really to emphasize that hard work.
And we are almost done. This is a look at the proposed municipal property tax rate in detail. We have spoken about our splinter taxes, and you can see those listed on the left. The FY25 rate in orange, and then the proposed FY26 rate in green, and the difference. And I'm not going to linger here for time, but happy to answer questions. And then the summary, as the mayor said, municipal property tax rate projected to rise less than 1%. Overall, projected decrease. And again, we saved almost $4 million through the reductions that we spoke about, which begins to fix that structural budget gap. We're making strategic investments in community health and safety, as well as housing. And that's it. Open to your questions.
Questions or discussion from the board? Councilor Carpenter.
Two issues. One of the reasons I'm glad Andrew spoke was to address services for older adults. And the city's really walking away from it. I totally appreciate what's been happening with CORE the last few years. But I think we should have looked beyond that or further back. I understand the situation we're in now, and we've got to regroup and revision what we need. But it's a substantial loss. And just to remind you, there are more older adults over 65 in the city than there are people under 18. We haven't cut the youth programs, but we substantially cut programs for the older adults. And, you know, I've talked to Aaron, and I appreciate it. We don't have a transition strategy. People are going to go, older adults are going to go without unless we get a transition strategy, and we don't have it right now. And I'm not going to tonight propose it. I guess what I'm asking is somehow in the transition planning process, we think about reserving, for lack of a better word, some amount of resources to make a reasonable transition. The city was transporting people. We're just going to take that away. They were getting meals. We're just going to take that away. And there's no planning leadership around older adults at the minute anywhere. So we need to identify that. We need to deal with it. And I think somewhere somehow that, just cutting out core. I have asked Director White, and maybe you can provide it to me, Catherine, how much did that service cost us? I mean, I don't seem to have a sense of it, so I think that's a piece of information that would be useful, and whatever else Parks and Rec did for older adults.
I appreciate that, Councilor Carpenter. Just, we will get to the dollar side of it, but just very briefly, I want to just make sure it's clear for folks who are watching this and maybe tuning in for the first time on this. The core program is winding down, but not until the end of September.
Yes,
We do
that's
have
correct.
a runway
Yes.
for transition, and we are very
Okay.
committed to doing that. And also, the city did not provide the meals. It was Agewell. We provided a location for the meal delivery. Just
Understood.
want that point of distinction as well. But yes, heard around transportation and the transition for the 8 to 12 folks who are using the core program. And definitely clearly heard around how do we get more strategic on senior programming. In the course of all of this, other community partners have reached out who are interested in helping to bring a more coordinated, comprehensive effort. So that is part of the work underway, in part to the public.
I had not heard that, but I think that's.
It's all evolving. So definitely just want to make sure it heard and understood. Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Other comments? Do you have a second?
Yes, a second one was on the housing position, which I absolutely support. I think the city needs it. I've expressed a little bit my concerns about how long that should be in the mayor's office versus CEDO. So budget wise, we need the money. But I would really like to have a discussion about how that gets used.
We might ask you that upstairs during the work session for CEDO, because I plan to share that with Tara and Scott and discuss details there. Okay, thank you so much. Other comments or discussion on the budget presentation? Councilor Barlow.
Oh, yeah, since first of all, I want to appreciate the challenge. I think I've said it in other meetings as well. I'm to try to close a significant budget gap. We have to make some really hard choices as a city, and I recognize that we're doing that. I appreciate the work that's my leadership in the city has gone into that. One of the things that I asked this afternoon that I think is just something we have to remember as we go into this difficult budget is that in a memo that the mayor's office put out last October, the estimates had been that it spent $6.4 million just alone in response to the homelessness issue that we're dealing with. And I think the estimates had been for this year, it might be $8 million or so in total, which is a significant portion of our, it's a high single digit proportion of our general fund budget. And so I am interested as we move forward this year and into next is, how do we unwind some of that? I mean, it is a disproportionate burden that Burlington shares, and I am almost certain that no other municipality in the region is spending this amount of money to combat this problem. And as a result, we find ourselves having to make cuts in other programs and services in the city in order to, balance a difficult budget. So I just wanna name that and know that this is something that we also, as we get into fiscal 26, we to redouble our efforts to make sure that other communities are shouldering part of the burden that Burlington seems to be shouldering almost exclusively right now. But that's just my only sort of editorial comment on the budget generally. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Earl. And I'll just note, while the legislative session hasn't officially wrapped up, because we're taking a pause to figure out a particular bill down there. H91 has passed both the House and Senate, and in that, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, is $1 million for local municipalities, but that's not nearly enough, as you just said, and as we've estimated, 10 months into last calendar year, we were at about 6 million. So there's a tiny bit of acknowledgement from the state level, but it is not adequate for what gets shifted to local municipalities. And I will also just say from the other 7 mayors, 6 who I've talked with, I haven't talked to the 7th one directly. There is growing displacement of obligation and financial obligation to come up with solutions. That's the right thing to do on all of those communities, and that includes Newport City, St. Albans City, etc. So just want to make sure that we can adjust the camera. I am here. It's not the voiceover on the side. I don't know how to do that. Thank you, Town Meeting TV. I just want to say that there's a small investment, but it's not nearly enough, just for the sake of folks on that issue. And I hope the governor at minimum signs that bill, H91, because without that, we're back to square one. Thank you, Councilor Travers. Play the remote control game. Other comments, Councilor Barlow, are you all set?
Also,
Okay, anything else on this item, being mindful of time, Councilor Davidson?
Yeah, just briefly, because we'll talk more upstairs, but I really appreciate all the work. I think this is, when I ran directions that I advocated to folks that city government should go, and I think when I heard the door across the spectrum of that, we can't just endlessly increase spending year over year over year. We've got to encourage. I was really heartened to see that we're going to be able to offer folks most likely a tax reduction. And that we're taking that to heart. So
Thank you. Encourage us to move on to our next item, if that's okay with councilors. We have this also on the state council agenda up there, upstairs, up there, somewhere. So with that, I'm going to close this item 4.2, since it's just a presentation. There's no action required of the Board of Finance, and we'll move now to item 4.3, which is a gross receipts ordinance change. But Treasurer's Office is going to queuing this up. Exactly. I forgot to ask you that, Catherine.
Well, I'm happy to queue it up. I think everyone knows what the ask is, which is originally passed last year, is a 2.5% rate on meals, alcohol, admissions, and amusements. And that was to sunset on June 30th. And we are proposing that not sunset, and we have built that into the budget. I will just note that despite hearing from a lot of businesses and some pretty specific requests, it has not come to my attention, and I don't think it's come to the mayor's, that specific request that we would sunset that. And in fact, from my perspective, we need that money, which is about $900,000 we expect over next fiscal year, to be able to provide the services for everyone with that $900,000. I added into the materials on Civic Clerk what this means, just so people have a sense. But the difference, even on, let's call it a very fancy meal out of $100, added to our 2 or 2.5% is the 9% that is collected by the state. So it's the difference of $110. If it's 1%, nope, that should have been 2. It's very small. And so let's use the cup of coffee example, which is less than a cent. Whether it's 2%, it's 0.06 cents, and if it's 2.5%, it's 0.07 cents. Both
On
of
a
them
cheap cup of coffee.
on a cheap cup of coffee. And on a $20 sandwich, chips, and a drink for lunch, it's about 50 cents. So that is what we're talking about in terms of real world impact.
Thank you, CAO. And I will just remind folks, as you were just using those illustrations, there's a consumption tax for gross receipts,
Yes.
which is paid with folks who have disposable income, of course, but also people who have that money. We, as we did last year, balanced this budget in ways that maintain that same framing of last year. We were trying to really balance how we raise revenue, both on residents minimally, but also not increasing this gross receipts tax, but keeping the 2.5 in place, because at least from my vantage point in administrations, a balanced approach is one that's really important, so we continue to raise the revenues we need to strategically invest in the downtown. I went over those, or the CAO went over those particular community safety investments that we need this revenue. And this $900,000 is a critical part of the puzzle to make sure that we're able to advance our commitment to the downtown and to residents here locally. So I'm mindful that we need a motion on this ordinance change. So I'm going to ask first if there's a motion so we can start the discussion. And then I know that there is a proposed amendment. Thanks, just to get us moving. So is there a motion on the item to get us started? Councilor Barlow? It is to recommend approval of the ordinance regarding, is that actually the The motion? A little informal.
Seems a little informal, but that is what we have.
Okay, do you, well, Counselor, do you want, Counselor Newbeezer?
Move motion statement. Is that right? Or you want me to read out?
Well, either the motion as it's written in Civic Clerk, or you can read it. That's for the record.
As posted in the, I moved to. Sorry, I'm so tired here. I move to recommend the approval of the ordinance for the gross receipts tax.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Sorry.
Seconded by Counselor Travers. Discussion. Counselor Travers.
So when we discussed temporarily increasing the gross receipts tax as far back as, I would say, December of 2023 as a means to address the budget gap at that point in time. And, you know, as we discussed that then with the prior administration and ultimately adopted it with the FY25 budget, I think many of us felt that that was a commitment that we were making to our business community, that the increased costs of going out to restaurants here in Burlington, the increased costs that I would say probably a number of our restaurants absorbed on their own would be temporary in nature. And I certainly understand the administration's and respect the administration's reasoning for proposing that the gross receipts tax would not sunset. But I'll also admit to some disappointment that the FY26 budget counted on these monies being there, because I do feel like we made a commitment to the public and to our business and restaurant community in particular, that this was going to be temporary in nature. And yes, if we look at just 1 cup of coffee, it's 1 cent. But if you're someone who works downtown, you get more than 1 cup of coffee a day. You go out to lunch downtown. You want to go out to a Burlington restaurant for that nice meal. I mean, that adds up. That 1 penny a day, or that $1 on a meal. And I'm mindful of the fact that even at the 2% that we started with, that's 1% higher than I believe every other city and town in the state of Vermont. So by going up another half percentage point, we were making it 1.5% more expensive to go out to a restaurant here in Burlington than Uski or South Burlington or Williston or Shelburne or any of the surrounding communities. So, I personally feel that we owe it to our business community, restaurant community in particular, to follow through on that commitment. That said, I know we haven't finalized the FY26 budget yet. I also know that if we were to allow this to sunset on June 30th, and then consider it going back up to 2.5% a couple months later, once we finalize the budget, the administrative difficulty that would place on businesses and having to go down to 2%, back up to 2.5%, and so on. So we have circulated a proposed amendment that, in order to provide us the time to really look at this in the full picture of the entire FY26 budget, would extend the sunset date from June 30th of this year to August 31st of this year. And so with that in mind, I would like to move to amend the gross receipts ordinance that's before the Board of Finance, as reflected in what's posted online as a proposed amendment for June 2nd of 2025, which would accomplish just as I outlined there, which would be to extend the sunset date until August 31st rather than June 30th.
So there was a motion on the floor by Councilor Travers to amend the ordinance, proposed ordinance change to, well, as he just stated, is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Barlow. Is there discussion on the amendment? Councilor Newbeezer and then Councilor Barlow.
Yes, I'm not gonna be supporting this amendment, and for a few reasons. First, I think, I'll speak for myself, but I did not view the sunset of the extra 0.5% last year's budget, as a commitment that I made. I saw it as a political compromise because we had to pass the budget. And I know that the Progressive Caucus, loudly and directly advocated that we not sunset it. Is one. I think two, we also need to zoom out a little bit. And while we are doing a ton to support our businesses downtown, and I want to speak to that, I think reasonable argument to say that property taxpayers shouldn't shoulder more burden, because if we sunset this, we need to find the money. So that either means property tax increases or further cuts to services. So I would be curious as to where sort of fill those gaps and how we're going to fill those gaps. But I also just want to say, at the federal level, unfortunately, we are most likely about to see the largest transfer of wealth from folks with money, from folks who don't have. That includes, upper middle class folks who have disposable income. And so I don't think a consumption tax is the perfect manner in which to get us closer to progressive revenue raising. It is certainly more so than relying on property tax or cutting services that disproportionately folks at the lower end of the income spectrum are gonna rely on. By definition. I will also say, I just wanted to run through quickly what we are doing, because I think I have not heard, we've obviously been having a lot of conversations with small businesses in the community about ways that we can support them. At our last council meeting, and in the last few weeks here, we've secured grants for more through BPP. I just want to list everything we're doing for businesses very quickly, because I think it's a very important context. Secured grants for more extensive business marketing. We spent thousands on construction specific marketing. Launched Behind the Counter series on social media that promotes businesses and gives small businesses a face. We've held 90+ events on the marketplace. We've held 100+ events in the downtown area. We have increased patrols by the Chittenden County Sheriff's Department and parking garage. We've generated 1.5 million views. Love Burlington generated 2.5 million views of Church Street Marketplace content overall. We've had 80,000 attendees at downtown events. We offer technical assistance in 2025. We offer technical assistance to 84 businesses. We've dispersed over $500,000 in 0% loans. We have highlighted 116 businesses through our marketing efforts as a city. And I'll stop listing things because there's many more pieces, not to mention this big conversation around construction. I know that DPW is pursuing work on Saturdays in order to speed up that construction. So I think we are investing in our business community, as we should, more than probably any municipality in the state. And right now we are at a time when everybody across the board needs to shoulder the fiscal burden. And that includes Church Street. So I will not be supporting this amendment for those reasons.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Barlow and then Councilor Carpenter, and then we'll see where we are.
So I agree with Councilor Travers, as we did make this commitment. And this may be a commitment that ultimately we cannot keep, but we don't have a clear picture on what the overall property tax burden will be on Burlington property taxpayers, because we don't know what's happening with the education tax yet. We were hopeful that we would know with adjournment last Friday and have some clarity on that, but we don't have it. So I support this interim measure just to keep our options open until we do have a clearer picture on all the revenue. If predictions of the 4% decrease that the school district said that they thought they could realize can be banked, then there may be some flexibility to let this expire, have a small increase in property tax and still deliver a reduction in overall property tax for taxpayers. And so I just want to keep it open until we have that clarity. Obviously, before the end of June, we would, we'll have that clarity. So by extending the sunset for a couple months, we'll still have this revenue stream and be able to collect that. And we'll have more time to make decisions based on a complete picture of what the property tax implications would be. And so for that reason, I would like us just to keep our options open, and I'm supporting that.
Councilor Carpenter.
I won't repeat what Councilor Barlow said, which I agree. And I just want a clarification. When would be, if we do the postponement or move it at, that we would have to make the decision? Would it be the end of June or the end of July? Again, what's the outside date that we would, to balance what Councilor Barlow said, how much local option, perhaps property tax, when that is just made in the context adopting the budget on June 23rd.
Councilor Carpenter, I'm going to take that one because I think there's an important process piece I need to make sure is on the record for the board to know. So for municipal tax rates, those are all our splinters, and the ones that we actually have the ability to change. They must be locked in before June 30th.
Okay.
You cannot change them once we're into the fiscal year. So I am also not going to be supporting, I'm just going to take a minute just to say this is why I'm not supporting this amendment. It closes our options because if for some reason we are not able to suddenly gain even more savings or more revenue, I should say, for the city, and this sunsets in the first quarter of our fiscal year, we cannot increase our parks tax. We cannot increase our highway tax. We create a $900,000 deficit. That's the actual word that we would start to use within our fiscal year 26, because we will have no other options to draw revenue from another place. Because once we lock in, we have to lock in June 30th. So the deliberative point is now to look at our different options to increase splinter taxes or not, and to also work with our partners at the school district who've been working on this estimate for a number of months. And I don't know the ins and outs of the education bill where it's at this point, but I have to believe that wild changes to the detriment of Burlington are likely not in the cards. Again, I haven't had a chance to review the bill, and we're trying to get an answer from the Burlington School District. But I really want to make sure you're clear on the process before you would vote on such an amendment, that without another solution, that we are prohibited from changing our splinter tax beyond June 30th to be a different source of revenue for this $900,000. Okay, Councilor Towers.
Yes, understood with respect to the splinter taxes. I do believe, and I would appreciate the city attorney and CIO's input on this as well, that if we did want to revisit this option, as Councilor Barlow noted, with respect to not sunsetting the gross receipts tax, that we could further amend this ordinance again, but with another proposed amendment to the gross receipts tax ordinance. And on that point, we have a council meeting on July 14th, which if we acted then and put into effect an ordinance change at that point on a 30-day timeline, that would take effect prior to August 31st, when we're proposing that this would be sunset. So I do believe we could still go back and revisit this question of gross receipts. This is providing us, from my perspective, more time for us to consider this as a tool or not in meeting our FY26 budget needs.
So mindful of time, Councilor Newbeezer, because I gave a second to Councilor Travers, and then I see where we are with the question.
I was going to say the same thing around process, that this is the decision point, it's not pushing a decision. I also just think this is not good budgeting practice. We've had conversations about the need to actually look at 2-year budgeting, longer sort of horizon, in planning for the city's finances so that we can manage them responsibly. We are setting up this is why I was opposed to the sunset in the first place. We're setting up a fiscal cliff, and now we're saying if we feel like we get closer to this September deadline in this amendment, we'll just either, I guess, extend it more or make this permanently 2.5% to cover that gap, if needed, which I think is feasible. It feels like it's defeating the stated purpose of the amendment. And I just think it's really bad practice. I mean, for folks watching at home, one of the only things that you hear about in Congress is the debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling, and how that's turned into just. And this is our little mini version. It seems to that, not the political football part, but setting up a fiscal cliff in a way that not allow us to plan as a community. And the final thing I'll say, because I know we're close on time. I grew up with, 3 of my 4 parents are small business owners. Usually it is not, whatever condition is set in the market by governments, etc. It is not those specific conditions that really determine outcomes per se. It's consistency and predictability. So I do not want to continue putting in provisions that businesses can't can't expect from the city what to plan for at a time when their economic future is already uncertain because of a whole slew of problems and things, many of which are outside of control.
So it is 5:48 p.m. and city council is supposed to be starting 3 minutes ago. So I know there's more debate that is desired. This item will go onto the city council item or city council agenda, of course. So at this point, I'm going to just exercise my prerogative as chair to call the question on this amendment. So the amendment on the floor is from Councilor Travers, related to the gross receipts tax sunsetting on September.
August 31st.
Not even the right month, August 31st. So that is the amendment on the floor. So I'm calling the question. So all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Nay. And we have a divided question. So I'm going to ask the CAO to quickly just call the roll real quick so we can just be on the record.
Counselor Barlow.
Yes.
You don't have to do it alphabetized. It's okay.
Great. Counselor Travers.
Yes.
Counselor Carpenter.
Yes.
Counselor Newbeezer. And President Mulvaney Stanek.
No.
3 nays, 2 ayes.
So the amendment.
3 ayes, 2.
3. Yeah, that is what I meant. Sorry. I did not say that. That is what I meant.
City
Yes.
Attorney and
Yes.
CAO. So the amendment is approved and now the underlying motion we vote on. So the underlying amended motion is now, I'm going to call that question. So you keep moving. So on the amended motion, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Nay?
Sorry.
And I'm not going to do roll again because that's the same count as 3-2. So the motion carries. All right. So I'm now going to pass the non-existent gavel to the CAO. I'm going to depart just briefly and I will be back to the city council meeting. And our next item is 4.4.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Chief of Staff, for being here. In the interest of time, I think we should forego a presentation and skip right to questions on the regional programs budget. Questions?
I already gave my 2 cents worth.
Yes,
Um,
great.
And need to find kind of, and I don't know where in your big picture you're gonna, I believe you should put some resources for transition. So be it this budget, Parks and Rec, I'm not opining upon or making any amendments at this point in time. I just am asking that as we pursue that be considered, and it's made more appropriate in Parks and Rec than regional, but.
Heard, and I appreciate that, and I'm happy to keep talking with you about how we can provide for a transition that continues to take care of and prioritize our seniors and doesn't overburden any one particular organization regions. So happy to work with you on that. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Travers.
I have 2 questions, which in the interest of time, I'd be happy to follow up on
Okay.
after
Sure.
the meeting, but just to sort of put them out there. My first question would be if we could get a further description in terms of what, if any, increased services will be receiving from the Howard Center Street Outreach Team through such a significant increase in our budget? Are we receiving additional services, or is this more aligned with our contributing more to a program that has provided quite a bit to the city over the years? My second question is around a number of the smaller regional programs that we're expanding be potentially cut. Council Carpenter mentioned some of it, but I can imagine for some of these others that while relatively small dollar sums for the city, could place pretty significant threats on programs itself. The Burlington Concert Band, for example, I suspect $4,900 is pretty significant to their operations. The SIBA Art Hop, another $5,000, $4,900 there. Just among some other examples here. So my question on these items is the extent to which we've been in touch with these organizations about the fact that city funding will no longer be available to them, whether or not there's an understanding of that, and has there been a discussion around how the city can help to ensure that things like the bike ferry and the art hop and the marathon, among others, continue?
So we reached out to everybody that would not be receiving funding. We did not reach everybody. We reached out to everybody by email and called as many phone numbers as we had, and had conversations with some people and heard back from some people. And to your point, yes, for some organizations, even a little bit of money is a significant cut. We heard from several organizations that though they were sad, though this could be detrimental to their goals and missions, they also really understand where the city is and recognize that we have to make hard decisions. We also offered, and we mean this, and this was well received by many, that if there's other ways we can partner that maybe isn't just by funding, we're very much interested in doing that. And so we've had some good dialogue about that. I will say very quickly, because I know we're running out of time, the regional programs budget is something that didn't have a lot of structure around it. And we would like to create some structure so that there can be more of like an application process, and we have more time to consider the city's priorities in the face of limited funding. We've tried to create some structure around it last year. We've put a little more structure around it this year, but we can continue to do better so that it's not just based on what was funded last year and the year before and the year before. And so we will continue to do that work. And with that, then too, we can have more of a dialogue with the community organizations who are being funded or seeking funding.
Yes, Councilor Carpenter, then Moody.
Actually, along that line, it still wasn't clear to me in both BCA's budget and Parks and Rec's budget, the priority for activities that bring people into Burlington, some of which the regional programs do as well. And so I really feel like we need to immediately sort of look at those budgets as well. And within them, for me, the priority is probably activities that bring people into Burlington. I mean, we had the discussion on the festival pools. So some of these are concerning in the sense that we're not funding something that comes into Burlington. I totally get what you're talking about the lack of focus. And so I think very immediately we need to look at, so if this is going to jeopardize something that is important to Burlington, we got to figure that out. And I think we need to push the departments that might be more readily to lend a hand, or maybe it should be a contribution from their budget and not this budget.
Another point well taken, and I would say because there has not ever been a lot of structure around this budget, this year we did overlay our community safety priorities, and with that, the very real and acute need to fund Howard Center Street outreach. without a significant funding contribution by the city to that program was at risk of just not happening because of the way the state is funding Howard Center now and the limited funds that Howard Center with that would be able to provide to Howard Center street outreach. Moving forward in future years, we can consider different priorities and different funding allocations, but this year we really are prioritizing community safety. President Travers, to your question about street outreach, the primary goal is to make sure that that program continues to be funded and resourced in a way that they can continue to do what they're doing. In addition, we are working on an MOU with them so that we have very clear expectations for both parties. And one of those areas of clarity is going to be around data collection and data sharing so we can better respond across our whole response system, whether it's BPD, DFD, street outreach, other community partners. So that data sharing will become a critical component of our partnership with street outreach.
Councilor Lease, do you have a question?
Yes, sorry, I need to run out to a work commitment for the next work, so I apologize that my question though was just for clarity around the Turning Point Center in Burlington. It may be not captured in this category, but I wanted to confirm their funding and just make sure and understand if they are continuing the same amount of funding from last year.
They are continuing last year. They did not receive any money last year and they are not receiving any money this year in this budget. And I'm gonna move us along. Any other questions, feel free to send them to Erin. We have 2 more items and negative 13 minutes. I believe that we put item 4.5 on because we wanted to highlight the great work of the REIB and the Empowerment Fund. Don't really have time. Would you like to give us 30 seconds, Interim Director Barry?
I'm Katie. Thank you, Katie, for coming as well. Good evening, everyone. In the interest of time, I will just say I was here a few weeks ago and talked about the Empowerment Grant Fund and the benefit it's been really to the members of our community throughout the city. We are sunsetting that program after this next disbursement, which is part of why it's on the Board of Finance agenda. We distributed funds in the fall, are doing our next disbursement for this spring. To date, we've been able to disperse, let me just get my updated numbers here. Between FY24 carryover, again, if you remember, I talked about not having an equitable empowerment grant process. So the application and the rubric. So after we had established that, there were some outstanding 2023 and 2024 award recipients that we kind of carried over through the budget resolution that this group passed for FY25. So we've been able to, with the total from FY24 and FY25, which was $134,000, we are right at $132,574 being able to get back out into the community. The other item on the list is for the Africa Day sponsorship. Again, we are really trying to be mindful that there is a very diverse community here in Burlington and really wanting to acknowledge and celebrate that community. So we've got some funding in our community celebrations line that we would like to sponsor that event for $1,000,000.
Excellent. I will not make someone read the very long recommended action, but would someone be willing
Can
to?
I actually say, so that
Yes, please.
there are a couple of miscalculations. So there's a new motion that Lori just added. So that is what we would be asking.
Great. Would someone be willing to make the amended motion? Counselor Travers.
So, gratitude to our RIB department. I would move to adopt the correct motion language as set forth on Civic Clerk to authorize the spending of funds from the Empowerment Fund and the Community Celebrations Fund as outlined online.
Excellent. Is there a second? Great, Counselor Barlow. And all in favor, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? And it passes unanimously. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and last but not least, we have Director of Finance, Brad Kuchenberger, online to talk to us about the master lease. How quickly can you give us an overview, Brad?
Give a shot.
Yes,
No offense to.
To the
her
master
office,
lease.
or to the master lease agreement.
could it wait?
Well, no, I do wonder whether or not this board is prepared to make a motion on it without a
Right.
presentation.
That would be ideal. Is the board ready to make a motion without a presentation? It is rather straightforward. We do it every year.
That was my thought.
Great. Great. Who'd like to make a motion?
Would move to, it's also a lengthy motion on civil
Yes.
clerk, so if you would accept it, so
On
I
medical.
I would move to take the actions indicated on civic clerk on item 4.6.
Is there a second? So great, Counselor Barlow. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? And the motion passes unanimously. Brad, you can talk about master leases at another time. Thank you very much. And this meeting is adjourned at 6:02 PM.